They are an icon of the Old West. The giant 1880 20-mule team borax freight wagons rolling again in what is now Death Valley National Park. Wagons recreated exactly as they were originally built by Dave Engel, a Montana craftsman who considers the massive wagons his master's thesis.
That's where I've kind of put it in that category. It's a culmination of a lot of years of learning to be able to put this together.
The Death Valley Conservancy, which commissioned this project, searched the country for someone who could duplicate the original but inoperable set of freight wagons that have long been displayed in the desert park.
That was the convincing factor for Death Valley.
A project that for Engel was simply a bigger version of what he'd been doing for decades.
I was already accustomed to duplicating their style of workmanship, and that's what they were looking for.
Dave grew up with horse-drawn wagons.
He always had buggies around.
His father's lifelong passion.
He grew up in a Mennonite family. He grew up driving horses with his uncle. Just kind of a love affair that was always there.
Engel was driving teams by the time he was 10, and horses were part of everything he did.
We had hunted on horseback. We packed back into the Bob Marshall Wilderness on horseback. Our whole youth was on the back of a horse.
But it got to be like eating ice cream 3 times a day.
When I left for college, right out of high school, I had my fill of horses.
Dave majored in agribusiness, but had no real interest in the field. He was working in a feedlot when his brother-in-law called, asking if he wanted to come back to Montana and help start a business fixing wagon wheels.
The first year we built a couple buggies on speculation from scratch, thinking, maybe we need to have something to sell.
Like a runaway team of horses, the business bolted right out of the gate.
We found ourselves not having time to build new stuff. We were so inundated with wheel repairs, parts and supplies, and fixing and repairing, restoring buggies that I have never built a new buggy since. It's always been custom work.
The partners would go their own way a couple of years later. Brother-in-law Rick Bischoff today owns a thriving business making carriage lamps for horse-drawn wagons.
And turned a business that was creating 30 lamps a year up to 400 lamps a year.
Dave's only real training was what he learned in high school shop class. But for more than 40 years, he's had one reliable teacher by his side every day.
I have often said that the wagons were my best teachers.
Every project is its own instructor, starting with his very first commission, restoring a pair of horse-drawn coaches for Yellowstone National Park.
So in the process of disassembling those and paying attention to the style of workmanship that went into building those, I just began duplicating that process. And so it was a learning curve straight up.
Every wagon, coach, or buggy is unique.
They're all different depending on how they were built, who built them. And that's been my study, is trying to duplicate the different styles.
Taking apart and rebuilding the wagons is a window into a bygone era of craftsmanship.
It's not only a wagon that is made to be functional, it's also made with finesse and style, and that's what intrigues me. Their craftsmanship is a marvel to me.
And they did it all without electricity.
Building those borax wagons, that was one of the things that was on my mind constantly, was how did they do this without electricity?
That is not the case for Dave, but some of his tools are almost as old as the wagons he restores.
This table saw here is a 1908, and it's just right for me.
There's a bandsaw almost as old, and a foot-operated lathe that dates to 1914.
So you don't have to worry about a computer chip shortage in here.
No. This is a pointer that points the end of the spoke that will allow it to insert into the hole of the tendon cutter.
But the tools are his only helper.
I'm not interested in a full production crew. I'm interested in doing the work more than I'm interested in managing people.
There are no apprentices in his shop either. But he does have thousands of them online.
Well, I've had a request for a large wheel, which requires a large hub.
Watching his many videos on his YouTube channel, that began with the Death Valley project.
The request was that I would document it by video, the process, that how it was done, because there is no record of how they built the original ones. So that's what got me into putting my videos on YouTube.
Dave shows viewers how he builds wheels, bends wood, and restores and reuses the original iron recovered from decaying wagons and coaches.
I'm going to run all these through the forge, which will help burn off some of the rust. It will loosen up all the nuts. I'll straighten what has been twisted and bent, and then eventually run them through the sandblaster, paint them, and then assemble them to the box.
The videos draw a big crowd, one of which had more than 7 million views.
It's an opportunity to actually watch how it's done as compared to reading a book.
And he gives advice over the phone from time to time as well.
Quite a number have contacted me on where to find equipment, how to build equipment. I get that all the time.
There's never any shortage of customers. Engel has a 2-year backlog of orders and isn't taking any new ones.
I'm trying to catch up on this backlog of work. And by the time that happens, I'll work on personal things. I have a number of projects that I'm going to do. So I'll still do the same thing. I just will do it for myself and not for customers.
But by recreating the rich work of the past, Dave may be inspiring a new generation to follow in his footsteps and keep this historic tradition of American craftsmanship rolling for years to come.